Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you might be, dear viewer. We are, once again, Compact and Bijou. To start with, it's Louis, Greg, and I-self. And I-self may not be here for very long because just behind my shoulder, a heck of a storm is about to hit. It's just, I can hear it's just blown all my deck furniture off the deck. So if I disappear shortly, it'll be Louis and Greg that we can speak to. We're not going to have Bruce this evening because Bruce is not very well. Richard Parker has obviously given up yet again. He's actually probably doing something very successful, and we wait for Rob. So let's just start with Greg. Greg, I saw you posted that you were doing something with something called, I've got to read it, Bayer Advocacy. It wasn't quite that. It was just something about farming, wasn't it? Now, Bayer, is that a good news company or a bad news company?
Yeah, so this advocacy forum is kind of their innovation summit, and it happens right before this big farm show called Commodity Classic that happens every year. And so I was invited to give sort of a TED talk about drones in agriculture. And then they talked a lot about CRISPR and gene editing, and then they had all these different panels and things in there. And Bayer's it's a large company, and they're involved in that merger with Monsanto right now, and so they'll be an even bigger company. I was actually pretty surprised during this forum of how much they talked about consumer confidence and the role of consumer confidence in agriculture and regaining trust and things. So I think that they're really kind of seeing themselves as a big ag company and also something that consumers are a little wary of. I was surprised actually at how much talk there was about that versus all the new technologies coming out.
Yeah, it's interesting. Down here in South Africa at the moment, we have the world's largest ever listeria outbreak, and 180 people have died, sadly, so far. Several thousand people have been infected, and big agriculture, big farming, I'm saying this all wrong because I haven't thought that I was going to say this, but just a modern factory farming, if you will, is coming under a little bit of, and food processing methods are top of mind here at the moment, very much top of mind. And there's little Bayer stands everywhere. So were they demanding to hear all about drones and how they were going to make? What was their sense then of how drones were going to help them?
Yeah, I think that drones, what I find interesting about, like, I've come from the academic world, and academics love to spend lots of time figuring things out. But it looks like Rob's joining the line. But within the farm sector, I mean, people want it to work, right? So like a drone has to work or they're just going to set it aside. And was surprised at how much people have already bought a Phantom or a Mavic or something, and they played around with it, but then they didn't really integrate it into their workflow. So I think ag has gotten so much of this hype within the drone world, but I think that we're still in that kind of long tail of adoption, and people are now really skeptical of what the data can provide.
And do you think that's because it's been oversold to date?
Yeah, I think that, it's much easier for me to talk to someone that wants to measure gravel stockpiles and get data on like how much crushed rock they have and have that be a dollar value return on investment. But when we're talking about ag, the use cases where you can directly link a dollar to an image or to a sensor measurement, it's just not there. It's usually a couple of steps removed, and then at the end of the growing season, maybe they'll return, see the payout. So I think that we need to be more realistic of like, here's what drone data are good for right now. Here's the direct connection to a return on investment. And then in the future, as we advance the data analytics and we can condense down that data more, then drones will be more beneficial on a day-to-day basis. But right now, I think it's really, specialty crops, phenotyping, and then direct payment, direct payouts like if I can create a map and look at heterogeneity within that map, I know where to put my soil samples or my tissue samples, and those cost a lot of money. So if I can do fewer across my field but still get a represented sample, that's a good example of where drone data would be a good payoff.
And I think aren't there other things coming online, such as crop sensors and more stuff being mounted on the tractors and an ecosystem within an ecosystem, if you will, of
totally.
Yeah.
And that's where a lot of so one interesting thing being in the ag tech world is it's kind of like the drone world in terms of like all this innovation and all this hype about big data. But then there's still this little lag and catch up of like, how do we interpret all of this and how do we condense it down? Sure, I can take soil measurements, all the weather data, all my plant data, aerial imagery, satellite imagery, and I can combine it all together. But A, that's a really hard problem. And B, what does it mean? And what does it mean to me as in Iowa with a bad internet connection versus Silicon Valley? And folks like Climate Core with their Field View platform, they're trying to be that platform that go to. But I think we're just not there yet. I think farmers are still skeptical.
Yes, it's sort of something that really should just boil down to a number, isn't it? That area there 7, that area there 4, whatever, you know. Because that, if you're a farmer, you're a busy bloke. You haven't, or lady, man or woman,
so,
you haven't got time. You haven't got time to go through reams and reams of stuff, perhaps subjective stuff as well.
And I'm actually surprised. So like my background's in science, and so I want to get super quantitative and be like, look, we can map the whole field to a pixel, and I can give you the exact percentages. But really, it's like if we could just divide the field into 2 categories, do this here and do that there. That's really all they want. Like they don't want to they don't need to know it's a 22% versus a 37%. They just need to know low, medium, high, and they're good to go. So I'm surprised at how simple it is.
That's one of the issues that we all have, not only on agriculture, but for instance, my company at the blade on the wind turbine blades inspections, we generate large amounts of data, and how to better pour off that data. So it's a problem that has been generated for years of big data. What to do with big data? Not just dump the big data to the customer and let the customer decide, but what is relevant on those mountains of data that we can generate. It's a problem, and I see now that it's also on agriculture, but the issue is that what to do with those large amounts of data. And it's about 2 companies that know how to process and retrieve those large amounts of data with drones, and how to better extract that information in an actionable way.
Well, that's the point, aren't we? We're at that sort of missing link, aren't we? We need the data's all coming in, and it's great. It just needs to go to a number. Hi, Rob. I haven't said hello to you, Rob. How you doing? Audio test. Are you there? Can you hear us over?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think you guys can hear me.
Oh, we can indeed. We can indeed. Cool, man.
Oh, you can? Oh,
yeah,
okay.
yeah. Can hear you. Yeah, can hear you.
I don't hear any feedback in my speakers. Sorry. All right, go
on. No worries. Yeah, no, it's a very ag is a very interesting problem, and some friends here have reached out to me in South Africa recently and asked me lots about it, and it is definitely being oversold. And you can see whenever a technology hits like a Farmers Weekly or whatever it's called in whatever country, when it gets into the press in whatever country you're in and whatever that's called, there's sudden interest in it. And generally the things that are being touted are it's just you can just look at it and go, no, that won't work. So what if I were a farmer, what sensors, because you're the proper doctor, Greg, what are the sensors that I should really be looking at, and what might I expect? Sorry, that's a hugely broad couple of questions.
No, I think that, so first I think that the low-hanging fruit right now is all the cooperative extensions and community colleges and all of these big ag schools. They have all these test plots that are out there, and I think flying those test plots repeatedly with off-the-shelf sensors like a Sequoia or a RoboticsSense Red Edge with different drones and processing it with different engines, and just really getting a good qualitative comparison with field plots that have known variation. Here's wheat across different fertilizer treatments. Here's oranges with high and low spray for citrus greening, for example, or some disease. outbreak. I think that would be like an amazing start for these cooperative extensions that could really provide great advice for a farmer, is fly these fields. We already have the plots set up. Let's just go out there with off-the-shelf drones, off-the-shelf, engines, and really get like, how good is this drone data and what recommendations can I make and what can I make, and create a community forum around that so we know what works and what doesn't work. That's some low-hanging fruit. I think for the farmers, they don't want to invest tens of thousands of dollars in hardware that's changing so quickly. So I think that, using a Mavic or using a Phantom 4, with a high resolution RGB and doing things like a video transect of your fields, a basic map that doesn't have to be super quantitative, but then go out there in your field and say, okay, here's where the variation is. I know this is the crappy part of the field due to soil, so that's not interesting. But look over here, this is where my pivot heads out. Or, basic field scouting, I think for $1,000 is pretty good. And keeping it simple. Let's keep it simple and start working it into your workflow. And then we'll start to compare notes on how do we then scale it up. Do we bring in a service provider that has a full kit that can get me my maps and deliver it to me? When is a satellite data good versus drone data, and what's the payoff for that for row crops versus fruit versus berries or whatever?
Well, that sort of brings up the shall we say, smaller, more expensive crops in tighter areas. That's got to be where it has more benefit rather than the whole Midwest.
Totally. I mean, it's at some point it's probably more cost effective for me to hire a Cessna and fly at 5,000 feet or so and map all of Iowa and deliver that data. And there are companies like Mavericks and some of the other folks that are doing that. But yeah, like in California, berries are 10 to 100 acres and they're super high value. And so if I can go out there and map those and have that be meaningful data, then that seems more cost effective. Or vineyards or specialty crops like fruit and nuts.
Yeah, it's if you're a regular viewer, then you'll know I rant on about ag as being a very overhyped market. But any vertical in our current dronetopia can be super hyped, and people are being led into the industry to allegedly make money doing things that we're not qualified. So in the hands of a farmer, that Phantom might be a great thing. He knows his land, He knows it really well, and he'll stand on his tractor. A good farmer will stand on the tractor. Well, if you talk to a good farmer, and he'll say, well, I've got a drone and it looks like you might have problems over there. And he'll say, yeah, because 20 years ago we did this, or because that's like that over there. That he knows his land. A proper farmer knows his land. A good surveyor, where I'm trying to go with this, is a good surveyor will look at a bit of land and knows what has got to be done, and he can improve his job. He can use the drone as a tool in his toolkit. All sorts of grown-up professionals can do that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But if you just come in with your Part 107 to make money in an industry you know nothing about, you're going to struggle. You've got to be using it as a force multiplier in whatever trade it is that you have. I will stop ranting now. Bruce is ill, unfortunately, so he's not here to stop me ranting. And I think actually, before we move on to Rob, I think Greg, you're starting up some new courses, I think, in something like this.
Yeah. So my background's in ecology, but I've been in the drone industry and worked for both the hardware and the software side. And so we're launching a new company, which I'll talk about in a bit or in a couple weeks. But I'm happy to talk about. No, it's okay. But I'm happy to talk about the courses. And so the new company is called Scholar Farms. It's about growing knowledge in the drone space. And we specialize just on vegetation mapping. So folks can go to scholarfarms.com and sign up for our newsletter. But we'll be announcing a masterclass on vegetation mapping. So we'll walk you through the sensors, the hardware, the software, and those data outputs. And it's really just kind of trying to specialize on how do you get good plant data if you are a Part 107 holder. How do you service the ag industry or the ecological industry? Or if you're a scientist, I've made it kind of broad so that if you know a lot about drones, I'll teach you about plants. If you know a lot about plants, I'll teach you about drones. And then kind of narrow in where the market really demands for such a course. So that'll be launching in a couple weeks. I'm pretty excited about it. I've been working really hard on it. So that's what our company will be all about.
So would that help me find the difference between different plants? Just straight. I'll tell you what's on my mind. And what's on my mind is water's big problem in the Cape. We're fine here. Loads of water's falling down behind me now. But further to the west of me in the Cape, they're about to run out of water in Cape Town. And they really need to start mapping waterways and working out what the invasive stuff is and getting rid of it. So that helped me with that sort of process, or learn how to do that sort of process.
Yeah, it's kind of a crash course a little bit in remote sensing light. Like, I'm not an imaging specialist. Like, my specialty is kind of plants and what they look like on the ground. But it'll help you generate the data layers that you need. So if you need your reflectance values of the plants and then to turn them into plant indices like NDVI or some other plant index, or upload it to the cloud and share it. That's basically what the course helps you do, is say, okay, what is this? What is a green band or a red band or a near infrared band? What does that even mean? How do I process that? What's a good camera for that? So that's kind of what we've targeted at. And then how do you visualize it? A lot of plant data is, how do you visualize it? How do I pull out the invasives versus the natives, or the weeds versus the crops? And that's a lot of just playing around with the imagery to dial in what it looks like and how you provide that then to a client or a collaborator or an agency.
And without doing the course, then would you'd have to ground truth that, though, wouldn't you? Or don't you? Or
you do, yeah. And that's something that I'm pretty specific on in the course, is like, look, I'll get you the data, but like what it means for your specific application, like, guess what, Part 107 holders, you have to get outside and hike around and talk to people and say, like, what does this mean? It's not like a gravel pit where you're like, this much rock. It's more like, okay, here's my water hyacinth or whatever your invasive is, and here's what shade green it is. Now, how do I draw that out, and how do I count the exact cover of that estimation, for example? And how does that help me order how much spray I should, or how much harvesting I need to send the guys out to do? So that's kind of where I'm headed, is trying to be realistic, but also there's so many pieces out there for plants, and it can get kind of confusing. How do you narrow it down, keep it simple, but really provide you what you would need to know to get started?
I do see a lot of people posting. I've seen it more than once, and it blows my mind that they buy the NDVI gear for whatever platform it is they have, and then the one post will be, I bought this, I'm going to be doing NDVI, and then you wait a week and it says, does anybody know how to do NDVI? Yeah. Right. Well, what's NDVI? I see that all the time.
Totally, yeah. So that's kind of the point of the course, is like, look, guys, let me walk you through it, and then I'll help, and for me, it's a full-time job of just keeping up with the industry, and like these different sensors, some are better than others. Like, some are just kind of crappy, but maybe they make a nice picture for what you're trying to do. Maybe you actually need to invest in a $5,000 camera if you're trying to do your PhD, for example, or you're actually trying to be a serious service provider. You should invest in the sensors that are going to work for what these people are trying to demand. If they're going to make decisions on the data, then you better have a good, not just a modified GoPro.
Yeah, I believe that's one of the issues that we see is any guy can go and pick up a modified GoPro and does something, or a post or create some filters on a GoPro and go and do what they call surveying of whatever. And it's not that. And that's one of the key barriers that I see on applying these high quality data to everyday users. For instance, it's very hard to justify for an agriculture to go and buy a $10,000 camera or sensor and on a $1,000 Phantom. So how do you justify that? For good data, you need good sensors, and that's one of the biggest problems I see everywhere.
Yeah, and a lot of it, I think, is just relative to what's your needs. I kind of think of it like with thermal cameras. Like, sometimes a low-res thermal camera that tells me like this is hot and this is cold is good enough. And that's the same with kind of the cameras for the plants. Like if you just need hot versus cold, but if you need it to be like this is 32 degrees and this is 31.5 degrees, that's a whole different kind of baseline for radiometric data. So it just depends on what your question is and what level of accuracy you might need.
And what is the name of the expert that could really truth NDVI data? Is it yourself? Is it your speciality? Because
No.
we know in a survey, it's a surveyor.
Yeah, it's not actually that hard. Like, so when I was an ecologist, like we would go out and like with scissors and we would clip everything and put it in brown paper bags and like dry it all out. And then I would weigh it all. And then I would say, okay, this pixel is this value of NDVI and it's 422 grams. Okay, I'll do that across my whole site. I think that the ground truthing is actually not that complicated. It's just a matter of like, here's my digital map and here's my sample points. And then let me just plot a line against them and see what the relationships are. So a GIS person could do that, but a farmer can do that too with an Excel spreadsheet. If you're just saying, here's my values of NDVI, here's my harvest levels, let's plot the two against each other and see how well it predicts. And that's why I recommend these ag extension, these cooperative extension groups. If we have experiments of known variation, then we would know what those relationships are. Just go fly the existing experiments and look at them. That's all we got to do. And then a farmer doesn't need to know, just the extension specialist needs to know and be able to provide advice.
What so the manufacturers haven't done this then? They haven't gone, because you're right, there's an agricultural research station just down the road from here. So they should be, I often say it, Denmark has a fantastic UAS test facility. And one of the things that makes it fantastic is it has a 10-kilometer square area that they know hyper accurately how it is mapped. Mm-hmm. And they say to providers, all right, then go map that then.
Yeah.
and they know jolly well exactly what that area is. And
totally.
So when the provider comes back and says it's 9, they say, no, it's not, it's 7. And this is why we know. And so it's not, so that's not, sorry, I'm ranting around this. That's not.
No, I think the problem is, and this is my frustration with scientists such as myself, is that like, the problem is like, great, I flew it. Now I'm going to wait 2 years to sit on it and write it up for my master's project. And nobody's going to know about it for 2 years because I want to publish it. And so what we need to think about with technology in general is, hey, the way that we report this and get these data out there, it's too fast now. Like we can't wait for our publication cycle to go through and I send it out for peer review and then it comes back and then it's 2 years later and it's totally outdated. What we need is a real-time way of doing this kind of information and these kind of tests. And so part of my newer job, and I'll paste it into the link here. And that can be shared. This is a new project that we have going with UC Berkeley. And what I'm doing now is building a custom course for them. And so part of the company is really, if you're an academic institution or if you're a commercial company, we'll build you custom courses if you want custom trainings. But they have a network of weather stations, and then they're bringing in low-cost drones and high-cost drones and trying to link all the data together. But part of this endeavor is also making it public in real time so that we can involve the drone community, the sensor community, the image processing community, and really try and solve some of these problems in real time rather than waiting 3 years from now when the research paper is reported. The downside of that is transparency. Like, okay, if your data are bad, then people are going to know. But at the same time, wouldn't you rather know now than 3 years from now? So
fast.
That was kind of a long rant. But.
No, but faster peer review. No, I'm quite amazed that more of these agricultural research stations, maybe they are onto it, and maybe they're holding their data close to the chest, hoping to find some.
And usually it's a matter of cost. Like, well, you need a grad student, you need a grant. They don't know what drones to buy, and so that's also part of what I hope my course will do is say, okay, guys, if you're starting in your lab, let me walk you through it and say, here's how you would get set up, here's the basic workflow, and then take it from there.
I've got a comment from Richard who's saying the map IR dot camera any good? That is a modified GoPro, isn't it? I think it is, isn't it?
Yeah, they're a modified RGB camera, and the problem with those cameras is that it's really like the sensor and leakage. You know, so they take the filter out, and so you have these two big bands. But there's a lot of overlap between the red and the near infrared, and they bleed into each other, and so it really affects your reflectance values if you want those real narrow, tight bands for taking your different measurements. So it just depends on what you want. Like if you're okay with a pretty picture and relative differences, then those are probably okay for you. If you just want like good versus bad, but if you want your actual, you know, the reflectance off your corn is this amount and that translates to this amount of fertilizer, then you really need the right sensor to do that.
And a little bit for dummies, you need to have a sensor that I believe, and you can put me right here, senses the ambient light as the image is taken as well.
Yeah, so either you need to know how much light's coming in because that'll change how much reflectance is happening, or you need a calibration panel, a white panel, so you're color correcting basically all those reflectance values to a known value, so you can compare apples to apples. So I can say like all this imaging stuff is pretty new. Like I've had to learn it all and think about cameras and sensors and all this stuff. But it really comes down to like, you should at least know what you don't know. And so you don't have to be an expert, but you should at least know, like, I don't know that. And maybe I should, if I'm going to say, stand on a podium and say, this is what you can do. So, you know,
that's not how it works in this industry. It's wrong.
No, but I think like you should at least know enough of like, even like I had a PhD advisor that said you should know enough programming to order a bagel, and it means like you should know enough to talk to people who really know, to just ask them what you need, you know, their advice basically, and when to ask for advice.
Shouldn't be afraid to ask,
Gary,
I suppose.
It's almost a problem with you counting the cows on the field. You have a camera that only sees the black cows, but you have black cows, white cows, and brown cows. So if you get a camera that only sees the brown cows, the others are flukes.
Well, that worked in the end, and it worked very well. It didn't work on my PC, but it worked in the app. So I can just say that worked. Yeah, I'm not sure about the use case. So it worked. It did work. What can I say? But what was I going to say? What was I going to say before you distracted me? I'm going to rant at you in a minute, by the way, Louis. But anyway, you've made me do things I didn't want to do. Yes, I know. I know. Put it away. Put it away. Put it away.
I'll go back to Gary. Just going back to the Bear event. One thing that people were really excited about in general wasn't just drones, but was robotics. So I think drones are like cool, but it was really like all the other robots for like autonomous weed pulling, spraying, phenotyping. Like ground robots were just as interesting as the flying robots. So that was actually, you know.
It's funny you should mention that, because I would say to Rob, Rob, provide me with a helicopter, because helicopters is what Rob does, and we'll bring him in properly in a minute. Provide me with a helicopter for crop spraying. But then if you sit back and think about it for a minute or two, you think, cool, it might be better to have a quad bike, or in fact the entire tractor being completely autonomous, going and doing the entire field, rather than, because I'm still a little bit of I don't quite understand the going back and forth for multi-rotors or helicopters. I still don't get it, but I completely get the ground-based vehicle. And I'm intrigued to hear that you say weed pulling as well. That's pretty amazing. That again must be in very expensive crops. I would have thought you wouldn't do that in a 1,000 hectares of wheat somewhere, would you?
Yeah, I mean, I think So I think it's fairly expensive crops, but it's also looking at, you know, one of the big issues for ag right now is really labor, and labor is the most, you know, it's the most variable and the least dependable sometimes, is getting the right labor, because if you need to harvest, you have to harvest everything at once at all the same time, and getting the right crew in to do that is challenging. So in California, they're really interested in robots for berry picking, since it's all fresh market, so they have to pick it all at this, you know, a very certain time. but you need cameras and imagery because it's super, you gotta. There was some robot competition of picking blueberries or something with robots or strawberries. But I think the weed stuff is interesting because it's not that complex of a problem. They're using cameras to say it just needs to be like not corn, right? You just need to know that plant is not whatever your crop is. And so I think there's some pretty interesting innovation there and the cost will come down with the new image processing.
I would imagine, other than for bugs, I should imagine that would have a huge impact in weed killing, if that's what they spray from crop sprays. So that would be amazing. I'll have to look at that.
This kind of application is very well suited for non-real-time usage. So you can go retrieve the data and process it offline. Because if you want to go and try to process real-time data images on the fly, on real-time, the hardware to do that is still very complex. You have the coprocessors from NVIDIA, the TX series, which are quite good. And the problem is that there are no algorithms, or if there are a very closed source to do that data processing. And that application that Greg was mentioning is quite well suitable for offline processing. So it doesn't have to be real time. So it's easier to tackle that problem. But the berry catching, it's that's a complex issue.
Yeah. It's easier to make jam, I think, than actually pick the berry.
Yes.
Gary, I'll just throw out, so Deep Field Robotics, who works under Bosch, they're one of the most interesting for high-resolution phenotyping with ground robots, and they do some really cool stuff. They get terabytes of data, but they're able to map all the plants in 3D throughout the growing season using a robot. It's pretty impressive.
Wow, I'm definitely going to look at that. It's what? All right. I've got to also mention the comment. Richard says there's a new series called Kernel, and that's from Map IR. I don't know about that. And Green Silver says that the weeding will be for organic crops, and of course, you're absolutely right. So if you can map, crop to that detail as they're growing, would that give you a good insight as to what the height might be at the end of things at harvest time? And could we reach a point where for certain crops you would harvest at the ideal time for plant 1053 on row 4 and the next one comes out the next day? Is that where this is going? Help me look at the future of this.
Yeah, I think for the most part, like the 3D stuff is mostly right now for high throughput phenotyping. So I have 10,000 different genotypes out in the field, and I want to select for just a couple dozen of them and in all my trials. So that would be folks like Monsanto or Bayer that have these huge trials, but to be able to go out and just phenotype them automatically. I think that the harvesting is, there's a lot we can do with photogrammetry. I think the cheaper lidar too would help to get more of those volumetrics, but plant height is pretty predictive. So once you know the early size of the plant, you should be able to predict the later size of the plant. But I don't think it's really selective harvesting as much because you're still got to get a crew out there. And it's more like, can I go pick this half of the field or go pick that half of the field? I mean, that's realistically where we're at. I think it's more for precision management and so that the whole crop gets more homogeneous, if you're managing it right.
I'm going to get the name wrong, but the guys from the Hands Off Hectare are going to hopefully join us soon. I'll have to get you. Have you heard about that in the UK where they've used robots for everything, all the planting, and I say I might have got the name wrong. They're coming. I'll have to get you on when that comes along as well. It's and of course the other thing with ground robots is no FAA to worry about. So if you're into robotics, if we could consider our drone world as robotics rather than drones, it might be a good idea to start looking at that as a specialization, because you'll be getting that going and they'll work in a lot of wind and stuff like that. But anyway, let's segue now to Rob. I can't think of a clever way of doing it. Greg, jump in if there's anything you hear that you want to jump in on. Rob, helicopters, they seem to finally be taking off. And now we can't hear you.
Oh, Rob's alleys are grounded.
They're grounded, yeah. Yeah, still grounded. Yeah.
Oh my God, Rob.
Yeah.
Now,
So what Rob's trying to say is all the new people that are working behind him have stolen the bandwidth, and that's why his microphone stopped working, because they're busy producing helicopters at such a prodigious rate.
not only that, they must be reading the new wiki on ArduPilot of Rob.
Very nice. Very nice. That's it. Nicely done. I understand that the wiki has just recently been updated, Louis.
Yeah, it was great work from our community members that have been. We've been pushing that, and the results are starting to appear, like the wiki, the training videos, and we have more in store to come up. Traditional alley were in need of some TLC, and we've been able to do arrange for the community to step up. And as an open source project, the community has stepped up and is producing results right now. And that's it. So we have also professional users like Nova Aerial from Rob, which Rob's company recently joined the ArduPilot project as a partner. So it's great to have these kinds of companies that derive from ex-members of ArduPilot. Is still a very valued member of the ArduPilot team. And it's great to see him grow and grow sustainably in a sustained way on a special niche. So it's not a copter, so it's not sexy as a copter. It's not plain, so...
I heard that. I heard that then, Rob.
Okay, you can hear me now then?
Oh,
yeah.
Come on, Rob.
Right.
I was trying to defend your lady.
Okay, so you can finally hear me. All right, that's good. Yeah, microphones are messed up. I needed to reboot this computer a while ago and I didn't, so I should have.
So helicopters, are they coming of age now? Are they actually?
Well, I don't think they were ever not of age.
No,
I
but
mean,
they
just
weren't popular, were they? They are big mincing machines. Don't catch the rotor blade. They won't be very friendly, and they're notoriously hard to fly and operate. So are they changed? Are they turning away from that?
The helicopters haven't changed. It's just their perception of them is changing because the rotor blades were never more dangerous than a quadcopter of similar size. If you've got a large quadcopter the same size as a good size helicopter, it's equally deadly. There's just really never been a difference. The only thing what was different was, back 7 years ago, I started out with a 600 size helicopter, which is pretty big. Yes, it was dangerous. Everybody else was flying tiny little quadcopters, right? Now that we've got really big quadcopters with really big propellers, they can perform the same as a large helicopter. They're equally dangerous, if not more dangerous in some cases, in my opinion. We use multi-rotors as well. I've crashed them all. I have a lot of metrics on how much damage they do to the dirt. And in my experience, multi-rotors can actually do more damage to the dirt. So,
hang on, sorry. So I tried to do two things at once and it didn't work. It didn't work at all. Have we not reached a point though where multi-rotors, and Louis probably going to disagree now, have sort of reached the maximum time and size they can go? We see all the new releases from DJI are all, yes, another 30 seconds longer they can fly or whatever. But that really is it. And here's Tom. Look out. Now we're in trouble. Tom's here now. But I think they've reached their limits. And your machines. I recently saw a video clip of one of your clients lifting something that was far too heavy for your helicopter, which was amazing. But you do underslung loads. In fact, that's what sparked my interest in helicopters again. Louis has sparked my interest because I see it under all these setup videos of happening in the RG pilot world, and they've sorted the wiki out. And I've been resisting. I have been resisting helicopters because I know they're a money pit I'll fall into. But a chap came along with he needs what is a standalone sensor, really. It's a 2 kilo box with its own GPS. Twice I've told you not to do that. It's a standalone GPS, and all I got to do is suspend it from something. And they've even tried to suspend this thing from a real helicopter. They put it to get it out of the downwash of the real helicopter. They put it on a bit of scaffold. And when our civil aviation authority found out that they put a large bit of scaffold with a 2 kilo box below, they weren't very happy. They weren't very happy with them. So they're exploring other ways. And I just instantly thought, helicopter. So that's where I'm at. So now I've ranted at you. Maybe you can unpack where you're at with underslung loads. Can they work? Do they work? What do people do with your helicopters?
Yeah, I mean, that's how I sort of got kicked off the first successes with the magnetometer market. And this is a sensor that really must be suspended from the aircraft because it needs to be several meters away. It's so sensitive. You know, we deal with the magnetometers on the aircraft, and we know how much trouble they are, but you can actually mount them on the aircraft, you know, the compass that we're using for navigation. These magnetometers are about 1,000 times more sensitive than that they're using for mining exploration. So they need to be suspended quite a distance away from the helicopter or the multi-rotor, wherever it is. And then as you're flying along, so the sensor also has to be aerodynamically stable. Because it needs to be pointed in the right direction, otherwise they lose lock. It's called, once they start swinging wildly, they'll lose lock. They're not getting data anymore. So they need to be stable. They need to fly nice and straight and true. So they needed a certain amount of airspeed to be able to do that. And they tried it with multi-rotors, and the multi-rotors could not sustain the speed necessary for long periods of time. You know, they tried making an airplane where they had the sensor in the wingtips, so it was a very long wingspan airplane they were trying to, and even then it was marginal. It was like a 4-meter wingspan airplane. Beautiful airplane, all composite, 4-meter wingspan. You're landing it on rocks, which, you know, usually doesn't go very well, so they get destroyed. So they tried that, so they did the airplane thing first, didn't work, so then they immediately jumped to multi-rotors like most people do. And they didn't get the airspeed out of it, so then they decided to try helicopters, and that's kind of where things took off for me. So
does this sensor
that's the biggest market.
Moving?
Well, together data does. We need to move. So, but it needs to be moving with, you know, a minimum 10 meters per second to stay aerodynamically stable, so it flies true. And you know, we're doing even 15 meters per second typically, and it'll do that for, you know, real operations, real weather, you know, for 35 minutes, which is not a lot of multi-rotors that can fly around at that kind of speed for, you know, 35 plus minutes.
What sort of weight are we talking about there?
3.5 kilograms.
3.5
weight for them, yeah.
And so you say it's going to get aerodynamically sorted out. Have you had to design that as well then, or did your sensor manufacturer?
No, yeah, the sensor manufacturer did that. All right, so yeah, they had designed it, but then they had a really large quadcopter, and it couldn't go fast enough for long enough. So
because so that is it? Oh, I'm thinking aloud now. Is that in effect flying? Could you put another autopilot on it and then have it trimming itself really nicely and be lifting itself as well? So it takes some load off it?
You could, but then that is generating a magnetic field.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
So I was about to say that the sensor is shaped very missile-ish, so it's kind of, you know, wind vane, maybe I should say. So it kind of points.
Yeah, wind vane is a better word.
Wind vane's a better word. But then when you said, "Oh, guided," I was like, I'm not going to say that.
Oh yeah. Sorry.
Yeah. We definitely have to be careful when we're doing test flights with it to not.
Yeah, guided wind vanes.
But you could you could follow the free flight sort of model ways of doing things with pen. Anyway, maybe you don't need to do it because it works. But I'm thinking too far ahead. But the 2 kilo payload that these chaps people need flying is just a box. It doesn't matter which way it points. So it sounds like a helicopter would be a reasonable way to go with it.
Well, one thing that he's not mentioned though is there's actually 2 problems with this. It's the massive weight, but also it's this lever arm of it swinging around below you. Because it has to be where it has to dangle below.
Yeah, I mean, I think a multi-rotor can handle that part of it. It really comes down to the speed, which is where the helicopter fills in this middle range in speed and endurance between multi-rotors and airplanes. And then the application of gas technology. Now you're flying for long periods of time if you wanted to, but we're doing the electric. My electric helicopter outperforms anything Amazon has put forward with their multi-rotors and crazy VTOL things. This thing flies farther, so at least anything they've presented to date, so publicly. So but they just haven't had a lot of attention. But I mean, I think things are what we've just seen. You did the link here for another. Basically, somebody's taken a full-size helicopter and put it, removed the pilot, put an autopilot in it. I mean, right now there's so many companies around the world that are just pouring tons of money into trying to get these man-carrying electric multi-rotors to work. You can do that today. Just buy one basically. This is a solved, how to fly a single person, 1 or 2 people with a small VTOL aircraft. This is a solved problem. And multi-rotors, a lot of people don't realize this, multi-rotors have actually they've been around a lot longer than helicopters have. The first VTOL aircraft were actually quadcopters, way back like 100 years ago. But there was a lot of problems with them, and so they abandoned it, and then they developed helicopters, and then now the advent of electronic controls really solved many of the control problems and the mechanical power transmission problems, and went away with electric multi-rotors. But the aerodynamics are still an issue, and that's why everybody's just there's a glass ceiling at about a 30-inch propeller where everybody's kind of struggling to get above that. And you have seen things that are bigger, but are you seeing things bigger that are flying 80 miles an hour for over an hour and available today for $50,000 to $100,000?
That's another. That is, I hadn't considered that. That is another glass ceiling. You're right. It's the 30-inch propeller. I hadn't considered that. Mm-hmm. In the comments, Matthew Gordon asked, "How loud is it?" I don't think those helicopters are any louder than a similar multi-rotor, are they?
It's typically quieter, and it's also a different character of sound. Most people find it less annoying. It's less of a buzz and more of a not quite like a real. Mine sound a lot more like a European helicopter as opposed to like an old Huey or something, right? But it's just a loud kind of whirring sound more than
because it's bigger, it's a lower RPM, right? So it's a lower. It's not the Soaring Bees sort of sound.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So
when
the tail rotor's working hard, you'll hear it sounds a little bit like a multi-rotor, but there's only one of them as opposed to 4 to 8. So
is that an electric tail rotor or is it a belted?
Yes.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah,
has that been common practice for a while, or is it?
No, I mean I don't know if I was the first one to do it at this kind of a size of a helicopter. The little mini guys have been doing it for a little while, but I think I'm the first one to do it with a larger size helicopter, and it's worked out really well. It's in my history with helicopters, the worst thing about helicopters is the entire tail drivetrain. And I still see that today with competitors. They're still doing it. People, the belts, you have problems with tensioning when the temperature changes. The drive shafts they vibrate. You strip the gears out. There's just constant problems. So we're just applying a little bit of multi-rotor technology with just having a separate motor at the back, and it just solves all the problems. So,
and is there pitch on the tail rotor? Is it variable pitch or is it just a fixed?
Yeah.
It is the same.
Yeah, right now I'm using the same variable pitch mechanism as a typical helicopter would, but it's just the drive line is missing. So that's the part that's missing. So we're also experimenting with fixed pitch propellers at the back just to simplify things further. But we're still just working on proving that out. One issue you've got there is that it can't push the other way ever. You can run a propeller backwards, but I've done thrust. It's about 20% the efficiency of running it the proper way. So you could generate a little bit of negative thrust, but it's not great. So
reverse thrust.
Well, yes, but would that be quick enough? Yeah. Anyway, I don't know.
I don't think it's a good application for that.
The another question coming is from Vachon is, what about stationing multirotors outside high voltage electrical lines to recharge? I think stuff like that. So I know the military were playing with landing fixed-wing aircraft on wires. Do we know anything about inductive charging? Anyone?
I'm sure it could be done. I don't see why it couldn't. I don't know a lot about that.
Landing how?
They were landing, this is several years ago, they were trying to land on sets of 11 kVA lines and land on...
but for a copter, for a copter, how would it? Is that what you're asking about? Or
that's the question. Is
I've seen what Hydro-Quebec is actually doing that for inspections. Sorry, I'm being distracted by the chat. So Hydro-Quebec has actually been doing that for hydro line inspections. They're landing multi-rotors on the high voltage power lines. I don't think it's something that you would want to do with your typical multi-rotor. They had to do a lot of work to make it possible. One of the things you've seen is they've actually got the long landing gear and the batteries at the bottom of the landing gear. So it's kind of like an inverted V, and it comes along and it lands, and then it's actually, the center of gravity is low, so it kind of stabilizes. But then the electrical protection is a whole other thing. So
it does a line inspection then, doesn't it? Because they have things that people would go at the poles and clamp on the line and let it run down the line, and they
run it down it.
Yeah.
And then it's actually got wheels on it. So it runs down the line with the rotor shut off, and then it gets to the tower. It takes off, flies around the tower, lands on the other side, and then keeps going. So it's pretty neat that way. And then they've got another one where they do that with the line shut down. There's another one they showed in a lab with I don't think it's hundreds of thousands of volts. And they've got the whole thing has got a Faraday cage around it, and it's just getting shocked. That's actually, they're using, Hydro-Quebec uses ArduPilot a lot, so they're doing that with ArduPilot, which is pretty cool. So they've hardened the whole system to it, so that's pretty amazing.
There's a video of some researchers taking a plane and hooking onto a building to perch. Yeah, there's that too. So. I haven't seen that method for power lines, but I've seen the military. So I think DARPA, they had a bird type robot that would try and perch on the wires to charging.
I'm pretty sure they would get vaporized if you tried it. So you'd need the Faraday cage, which now it's super heavy and you can't fly very long. So you're not going to get far away from the power line. It doesn't seem like a very great concept. So
maybe he charges himself from the line. Who knows?
Well, but that's what I'm saying, right? So then it's got so much weight for the Faraday cage that it can only fly for 5 minutes. You can never be more than 5 minutes away from a high tension power line. So,
well, good thing there's power lines everywhere.
Yeah, that's true.
No, not so the future. But anyway, I won't go down that road. It's funny you mentioned the everyone wants to make a flying car, because before we started, Greg mentioned that, and I don't know if you guys have seen it, that Porsche have also jumped into let's build an electric flying car. Or I think you just have to have that headline at the moment. You just need to get a press release out there with it.
Yeah,
but I mean, when are they coming? When am I going to buy my flying car?
I went with the nuclear powered car. Where's the nuclear?
Does everybody remember the Mahler Sky car?
Yep.
Yes.
Over, right? I mean, did we ever get that? It's never happened, right? I mean, they teased that. That was Popular Mechanic, front page of Popular Mechanics for 10 years on and off, right? Never happened. Not saying flying electric multi-rotors will never happen, but I just think the reality will be a lot different than what people think it will be. It's kind of like the ag stuff, right? Everybody has this perception, all these farmers are going to go out, get all this data, and everything will be great. I think the electric multi-rotors are going to be limited to about 15 minutes of flight time. So that, at about 70, 80 kilometers an hour. So that's your range, and that's maybe as good as it'll ever get. So,
although we soon, hopefully, will be traveling through tubes.
Yes.
Yeah, then everybody's going to be going underground in the tubes, right? So,
do you know what? They've been doing that in London for nearly 100 years. But anyway,
on the hype, I'm just trying to figure out how we can use blockchain to deliver marijuana with drones, and then we got $1 billion company. Like, that's just, we got to put those three things together. That's the darling.
Is that on the record, Rob?
Yeah. Those three things are the darlings
sure
of tech industry.
I think you're missing a few paradigms there. That's not enough. Three is surely that's not enough.
You need some machine learning and artificial intelligence mixed in.
There we are. AI. Gotta have
machine learning, computer vision. What else? And crowdfunding.
Crowdfunding. Now I believe. Look, he's already getting a telephone call about it.
Oh my God!
Make it happen.
I'm sure he's a patent lawyer that wants to patent Rob's idea.
That was a venture capitalist, I think.
I think it was actually my boss. I think he's like, what the hell are you talking about? No, he was trying to reach me earlier, so I have to call him back soon.
Well, you've definitely in this drone world, you've definitely got to hit the critical amount of numbers of
buzzwords.
Yeah, it's not 3, Rob. That is a very, very poor show. Very poor show.
How many were for the bingo card that you use to carry to meetings?
Yes, that's what we should have, isn't it? Yeah.
No, we joke, but I think it, very seriously. I truly believe that on the hype curve, I think drones are now well up onto the slope of enlightenment. And we're starting to really do productive things with that, especially with I'm seeing that all around, and there's still hype going on, but I think the serious people are really starting to do really serious work, like what we're doing with the magnetometers, which is a big part of our business. Is it's doing things that it started off with drones just kind of filled in the middle, where there's 2 ways to do magnetometer surveys for mining exploration. Is you had guys on the ground walking around with these backpack magnetometers, and they walk and walk and walk in the bush, and there's bears and rattlesnakes and cliffs and holes, and guys get hurt. It's slow, it's dangerous, right? And then you've got the manned helicopter doing it for a wider area, but and they could go fast, and they also use planes for it, right? But the drones sort of filled in the middle, where if you had a survey that was kind of too big for a manned survey and too small for a helicopter survey, a drone kind of filled in the middle. But we're starting to see now where you have drones replacing manned surveys because the safety aspect, right? We don't have guys walking around in the woods with bears and all that sort of thing. So it's safer that way. And then there's, on the other side, we're also getting higher resolution data than the manned helicopters can get, because we'll fly these things at 10 meters above the ground, which you're not going to do with a manned helicopter. At least, maybe some guys will do it for a short period of time, but that's dangerous work. The magnetometer surveys can be, helicopter crashes with in the mining industry. It happens frequently, not just with mag surveys, it's just lots of stuff. And that's, it's been said so many times with drones that dull, dirty, and dangerous. And I mean, what's more dull and dangerous than flying a helicopter up and down, back and forth at low altitude all day long? Nobody wants to do that. So
the number of fatal accidents that occur with those kinds of surveys with the real helicopters.
Yeah,
that's also an issue.
It happens all the time, and so the drones are starting to replace those types of surveys. In some, we're still kind of small scale. I think one of the big limitations is beyond visual line of sight flying. There's a couple things going on. I think FAA did some work on that last summer. I think Precision Hawk participated in a trial there. Transport Canada is putting one on. They've got a request for proposal. 4 companies are going to get to go out and do BB loss flights, basically on a trial basis. So we're looking at that, and that's where things are really going to open up, because then you can start doing kind of a medium-sized UAV helicopter, gas-powered thing that could fly for several hours and just come back. A lot more data, and that's where the drones are really starting to supplant them. So.
Or launch multiples.
Like 1,000 drones.
Yeah, and again on the slope of enlightenment, you know, lots of people playing around with swarms, and you know what, you know, Intel obviously has done huge swarms for shows, but even doing surveys, you know, the biggest part of the regulatory hurdle for drones has been, you know, keeping them within visual line of sight has been. It's not that they're expecting the pilot to be piloting them anymore. It's really just deconflicting the airspace. Right, making sure that no manned aircraft comes along and crashes into your drones. Well, you can fly 3 or more drones in close formation and gather your data faster. As long as you can see all 3 and make sure no Cessna flies by, you're still doing that deconfliction job, and now you can gather your data faster. And I think that's what's going to be a big part of.
Yeah, I mean, time is money.
So,
time is money. So, you know, if you just do buckshot, just get 10 drones, get them done, and you're done in half an hour, and you get the whole day's worth of work done.
Yeah. And then
also, a lot of times you're trying to cover maybe a large area, and it takes you a long time to do it, and you don't want the exposure to change from clouds moving or whatnot. You want to snap what it is now. You can't with one drone.
Yeah, exactly. If you've got, you know, some of the photogrammetry jobs are sensitive to the lighting, and so if you've got a break in the clouds, you need to get out and get it done as fast as possible. There's also other sensor types that we're looking at where we want to gather data from multiple locations at exactly the same time, and for other purposes. I won't get into that too much more, but again, you know, so swarms, and so we get up on this slope of enlightenment where people have been playing with it, and now we're going to be now that the technology works, we start to find out what are the productive uses of it. I think we're well up on the curve. So.
That's actually something that Randy's been working on. Was the or Randy and Peter were on ArduPalette. We're doing the drone swarm via, instead of a localized system, it was drones following drones.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you could probably do that. I think.
I think I disagree with you quite with where we are on the slope. I think we're still in the trough of disillusionment. I think we haven't quite but it's good. Either way, we're beyond. We are beyond that height. I think it's going down the slope, or we're just beginning to climb again. But we've gone beyond the big height. I agree with that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends who you're talking to and what they're trying to do. But there's some people that are still down in the trough, but I think there's a lot of people that are really up on the productive part. So.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I think there's likely to be some people come along soon that'll say, "Why don't you use it for that?" And everyone will say, "Of course, why don't we use it for that?" I think there's some grown-ups are going to come out of some industries that haven't considered this yet, and they're going to come up with some fantastic use cases for robots of all kinds. Matthew Gordon's asking, "Have you flown over Oak Island lately? Does that mean anything to you?" It means nothing to me.
I think it's the TV show, right?
Is that they're looking for treasure or something?
Yeah, I think that's
what
I thought it was. So I'm not sure.
Yeah, I have not, but
I mean,
drone.
I think that you're right in terms of like the folks right now that I see, you know, adopting the technology are kind of at this higher level with high level sensors where the data really is super valuable. And so whether that's like high-end R&D or academic or agency work, like I think we are kind of coming out of that trap with the folks that are willing to pay for very high-end quality data at a top tier. And that's not a Phantom 4, but that's really custom integration. But I think that we're there yet in terms of they recognize what the value is. It's really dial in the sensors and how do we collect repeatable data that, you know, improves over time. So.
Yeah, and you know, to that point, you know, lidar data is starting to come up, and that's another market that we're focusing on because you know, again, we've got a fairly heavy sensor. It's fairly expensive. You want to try to cover ground with it, so we can do 15, 20 meters per second with a VTOL platform, you know, for 30, 40, up to 50 minutes with something like that. You know, I did one flight, real world conditions. It was 0 degrees Celsius, so the batteries were cold. We flew a 4 kilogram lidar sensor for 35 minutes. So that was pretty good. And so the lidar brings with it, you know, the value of the data. It's better than photogrammetry because, you know, for a lot of reasons. So one of them is it can see through a lot of vegetation, so you can get the ground. If you're interested in the ground, not the trees, the lidar is really what you want. And then it can also, you can continue operating even in bad lighting conditions. So you could fly at night if you want. You can fly when it's overcast. You can still get data through all these weather conditions. So that's where lidar is pretty valuable. But the sensors are extremely expensive, $100,000 to $300,000. So the barrier to entry to that market is.
But I've heard rumors as well as for colorized lidar, so it gets both the distance, but also they can detect the color on it. And I think that will eventually replace photogrammetry if you can get a colorized laser scan and you detect both of those features, then you're good to go.
I'll put a number on that.
We were flying with a 2020. Well, I mean, we're already.
That's when that will replace photogrammetry. 2020. I'll put a number on that.
Yeah, I mean, like when you say colorized, I mean, we already did that where you're flying with a lidar and a camera at the same time, and then you just combine the two. Is that?
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly on the sensor, but I thought it was that the actual laser can detect the colors at the same time, but I'm not sure exactly what the sensor is that they're using for that.
Yeah, I'm not aware of anything like that, how the laser would detect color, but we are flying with and this is what the helicopter platform can do, is we're flying with a 3 kilogram lidar with a 0.5 kilogram camera, a good camera, an A6000 with a good lens, flying them together at the same time. So.
And I bet that sensor will weigh 1.5 kilos, I bet that sensor will weigh 1 kilo in 2020. There we are. That sensor
could be
1 kilo in 2020. And it'll cost not a lot. It won't cost that much.
That's one of the interesting things I've seen happening, is that the drone industry had this rapid expansion in technology, or the reduction in the size and costs, is because we're getting our sensors from the cell phone market, right? So we kind of piggybacked off that and benefit from it. On the lidar side, we are now seeing, like, we're basically piggybacking off the automotive market, where these automotive companies, they want smaller, lighter, cheaper sensors, and they're pouring tons of money into it. And all the lidar sensors that we're using, I mean, that's the intended market. So as that market puts money into it, develops new things. In fact, Yellow Scan just came out with a new, I forget the name of the sensor, but they got a new one, and it's the latest automotive sensor they got from Velodyne. It's smaller, lighter, cheaper. Well, I don't think it's cheaper, but it's actually, pardon?
The puck light, perhaps.
Yeah, it could be. It's higher. It's basically, I think it's a little bit lighter. I think the cost is the same, but it's higher resolution data. So
yeah,
and
we're
then
kind of piggybacking on that.
When we've got this world of autonomous cars driving around with their lidars, they're going to be pulling terabytes, and the tractors and everything, they're going to be pulling terabytes of data, and you might end up needing only to fly the little bits where the car, the tractor, and whatever else can't see. If you could pull, perhaps the car makers could start uploading that data when the car gets home and selling that data on to other people. Anyway, I'm thinking ahead, ranting ahead. But just imagine a sensor-rich world.
Yeah, that was actually one of the keynote speeches at Intergen 2 years ago, I think.
I think it was last year.
Was it last year? Well, it wasn't this recent year. Maybe it was one before that, 2016 year, 15 or 16. Anyways, one of those, it was all about sensors, drones as a sensor, but as in feeding to autonomous cars, and so you can see how all the dynamic data. Cars would store all the static data, where the stop sign is and where the mailboxes are, kind of thing. But where all the bushes are and all this, where the people are, anything that's dynamic, that can be fed in by drones. It can be swarming around, imaging stuff, feeding into the Google servers or whatever it is. They can tell what the dynamic environment was and see what's been changing.
Well, wasn't it that the cars themselves can they would be feeding all the data? I think as they're driving around using their lidar to avoid crashing into things, they're also sending the data, like, here's a new pothole. And
right. Well, the idea is both. So actually have drones feed into the same system, so that the information is already there. Even if it's changed, if another sensor has visited that area, it can feed into the autonomous cars, so they know this new dynamic. So they have this dynamic data database.
Well, we'll end up with shocking amounts of data, which will all be handled by the faster processors. But you can imagine it'll be shocking amounts of data that'll be out there, and coming back to our original farming conversation, a lot of tasks will still recall a receipt or just need just a number to be spat out or something. So we're going to have a lot of complex, super complex data that can all interact, and Internet of Things and all these things. That's all been, funny enough, that's been Internet of Things made big news in South Africa today, like it's just been invented, which is amazing. But
that's the whole thing, is data versus actionable data.
Yeah. Well, yeah, exactly. So we'll have all this data. How on earth are we going to crunch it, and how is it going to be displayed, and all those other good things? I'm ranting on.
And I will say that, like, Climate Corps has invested $2 billion, or Monsanto has invested $2 billion into Climate Corps trying to do all this, and they're still not profitable. So I think it's a multi-billion-dollar problem, is just managing the data and presenting it down. That will be the bottleneck.
Someone's got to come up with some very clever display, and whatever ArduPilot does or DJI does, it's all got to feed into whatever the system. A standard's got to be developed. Yeah, we know how well that always works. So it'll, yeah. It's what an interesting time we live in.
Well, what's the best product standard? Because there's so many to choose from.
Well. Yes, I suppose so. You're not wrong there. Look, we've gone over the hour. We've accidentally gone over the hour. What did I saw a big, they flew a Predator at an air show, which I thought was amazing. I was going to mention that. I think that's the first instance I've seen of a large military platform actually being flown at a public air display, unless you guys know any different. And I think that's all I wanted to sort of say. Was any other stories that caught anyone's eye this week that they?
I think Bruce was sick because the planes were diverted from Auckland Airport on the drone reports.
Yes.
So that's why he perhaps got sick.
I think it's probably he was on holiday in Auckland or something like that, and we can say this.
20 planes diverted from Auckland because of a drone sighting. Was it something like that?
It was, and one of them having to go about 500 kilometers as well for his diversion. So that's some people hacked off. That's for sure.
Yeah, there was the incident in Quebec. I think since the last time we spoke, in Quebec, where they had an airplane claim that they had a drone strike, and so it landed. Pilots claim they hit a drone. I don't even think the engines were cool before our Minister of Transportation was, confirming that there was a drone strike. There was very little damage to the airplane. I think some scuffs on the wing, which couldn't tell if it was, I think they were yellow scuffs on the wing. So our what's the department? Transportation Safety Board did an investigation, and basically, I think they're done with their investigation. They've just, it was a drone strike based on nothing more than the pilot's statement and some scuffs on the wing. That's all the info there is. So, and it's.
I can see we're coming to the end of this time, though, of these sort of discussions, because as the people find valuable uses for that first 500 feet, be it their magnetometer or whatever research they're doing, as that first 500 feet is going to become all ours. You'll
have to pay the fine to use it. You'll have to pay your dues to use that space.
You will have to pay.
I think you meant for 400 feet.
No, 500 feet.
No, 500 feet. It had to be 500 feet. I know what you mean.
Yeah. You have to keep 100 feet separation between layers.
Right.
That's why there's a rush to 500 feet. I know what you mean. But there's a rush to 500 feet. But we'll see. And it's a pity that Richard Park is still drinking after his companies. And Altitude Angel, which is within ArduPilot, is within Mission Planner, and Altitude Angel is being used by the National Air Traffic Service in the UK now, and it's within their ops room. So we're quite a bit ahead of the game there. So there is a UTM already built into ArduPilot, and you can use it for free, which is amazing.
It's a shame that UK is going away from with Brexit, so we won't get that in Europe.
But they're not. They're staying within EASA. They're not. They're not moving away from EASA.
That's much better.
So, but whether, I don't know.
I really don't.
Who knows? Yeah, let's not go down that whole Brexit route. I'm not a fan of that. But there we are. There we are. All right. Look, it's 15:15. Has anyone else got anything else before we go? Going once. Go on. You just said
no. Go ahead.
No. All right. Going once. Going twice. Gentlemen, thank you very much indeed. Greg, tell me again, Greg, what was that website we have to look at for your new
scholarfarms.com. We'll grow your brain.
There you go. And Rob, where can we find your helicopters?
Novarial.com.
Novarial.com. Tom, whatever. What are you trying to sell us, Tom? I'm trying to sell us anything, are you?
Tom is something inside. Tom is just something inside.
Just saying. So they're aeroplane flying in Arduino. Oh, look. Nobody's you're very kind. Nobody's look. I've made an ornithopter or something like that. Nobody's mentioned that. Anyway, we'll just put that there, sure.
If we are just talking about crash things, if we are talking about crash things, at the last Archer Pilot unconference down in Australia, we had some videos of a really steep Skywalker X8 landing. I was doing 45-degree landings, and I just let everyone know that I don't recommend that normally. It's a little excessive. It's possible, but it was ugly.
This one was completely dumb thumbs. The twin-engine tail-sitter came in, panicked. It transitioned to anyway. Dumb thumbs. Oh, just shut the throttle. Oh no, that won't work with this.
Come on, Gary. You know better. Just stay away of exotic configurations. Why do you need a tail sitter if you have planes, alleys, and multi-rotors?
Because I need
you can.
I need to make sure before I go into bloody helicopters that I don't want to. And yes, because you can, because it's all there.
Come on.
because I can. No, you're right. Yes, I should have. I should have let the autopilot. The comments. That's exactly what I should have done. That's exactly what I didn't do. But where I fly now is a big slope down to a dam, and so if it kept going, it would have been a heck of a walk. And so I decided to terminate the flight in a safe, professional manner.
You needed the rover then. You needed the rover to get
there. I don't. The thing is, I don't think my 14-year-old would have been very gracious when I asked him to go through the gate and walk down the bottom of the hill to go and get it. I think I would have learned some new modern youth language from him when I asked him to do that.
That's also a possibility.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's a big possibility. Guys, thanks very much. Tom, great to see you. Louis, thank you very much. Rob, thanks for coming to talk to us. And I did learn from the crash. I learned to read the instructions. And Greg, thanks very much again. Don't forget, dear viewer, join us again at 2100 GMT. I will have the crash video up soon, and also how that came to be in the next couple of days. Try and make a successful one. Otherwise, see you all again 2100 GMT next Tuesday. Hopefully Bruce as well, and hopefully we can get Mr. Parker aboard to give him a hard time. Anyway, thanks so very much, everyone. See you again Tuesday. Bye-bye.
RTFM.